Welcome to the theory of original nature. In the period of the Renaissance, tensions arose between two worldviews. The first, a traditional religionist perspective, might be illustrated by Augustine, who said humanity lay couched in sin. Sin was first visited upon the will, he said, weakening it and inclining it to evil. Original nature was compromised here, but not lost entirely. The second, a humanist adventure, might be summed up by Pico Mirandola, who wrote Oration on the Dignity of Man in 1486. Pico's oration became an anthem for an era, affirming full human potential, the dignity of liberal arts, and the rightful quest for unlimited knowledge. These perspectives, lying between compromised original nature and full human potential, have never fully been resolved by either tradition. Yet original human nature is closely tied to the enduring Greek notion of eudaimonia and the more recent maxim of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In this respect, the theory of original nature might be of interest to many. The index sketches in the drift of the presentation. The divine image talks about original nature. The Imago Dei, as a set of innate dispositions, describes original nature from a psychological perspective. Tied to the idea of original human nature is individuality, character, and calling. The idea of position addresses the issue of belongingness and the personal place in our world, ethics and virtues included. Systems theory examines an idea of patterns and organization, and how the quality of communication defines whether any system is sustainable or not. Logos creativity is discussed, then the presentation ends with an appraisal of existential thinking, which lies close to our theme. Some presenter notes have been added, so the URL at the bottom is your link to the original text if you're interested. Throughout history, there have always been people grappling with fundamental questions about existence. Who am I? Why am I here? Buddha thought life had much to do with suffering. After immersing himself in asceticism and meditation, he came up with his solution. He proposed the recovery of one's original nature through spiritual discipline. His Four Noble Truths offered an understanding of the human condition, and the Eightfold Path of Mindfulness and Conduct became an 8-step program of recovery. Socrates, however, thought the true self was essential if the city-state was to thrive. He encouraged people to look within, to know oneself, and to hitch one's dreams to knowledge, which he proposed as true belief combined with logos. Reason plus truth pointed to the ideal human being, and therefore to the ideal city-state. Jesus took a spiritual approach, saying all should be born again, released from sin, and likewise moved to a renewed state of being akin to the true self, as sons and daughters of God, recreated in the image of God. Feuerbach, on the other hand, suggested our unlived human potentials were projected, objectified, and revered as God instead of being lived. Therefore, by denying religion, human nature could be recovered, and potentials could be lived out fully. Nietzsche proposed something very similar. Marx tackled the idea of human alienation from a materialist point of view. Deprived of the rewards of their labor, it was capitalists who had robbed them of their human nature. Therefore, the capitalist society had to be overthrown. Yet communism failed in its economic theory, and today there's widespread and controllable corruption within these systems. One could say capitalism, communism, and religion have so far failed to create a just and free society. The theory of original human nature raises the question of whether there was a pre-fall ideal which was lost, or whether, from a humanist perspective, we're simply on an evolutionary journey where the work of adaptation and heritable traits is just not finished. There's a case for synthesizing some of these perspectives, but for the time being, this theory looks beyond the pathologies of the fall to a pre-fall ideal. The theory of the original image is therefore an ontology, which looks at the divine image and divine character as a true self emergent from deeper ground. The late theologian Paul Tillich framed this up as his Urgrund, or primeval ground of being, and Urbild, or original archetype, a pattern or blueprint for the true self. Original nature is related by pattern to this idea of resemblance to the Imago Dei. It offers a sense of secure placement in our universe. Sang-Hun Lee, the author of this work, offers us two Korean terms, Seung-sang and Hyung-sang. These relate to Yang and Yin and the Way, as Chinese philosophy puts it. Hence, humanity is an encapsulation and integration of these universal properties and patterns of existence. We are a microcosm of the larger whole. We are anima and animus. We are masculine and feminine. It would not be wrong either to take David Bohm's ideas of his implicate and explicate orders to heart. Macrocosmic and microcosmic realities helping to take us up to the present quantum age that we live in. Likewise, a Yang-Yin creative dialogue reflects a spiritual mind set in dialogue to a physical mind, married, as it were, together for good creative reasons. From Greek times to the era of neuroscience, the idea that mind holds also to a tripartite function allows us to think of virtues tied to these proclivities. Emotions seek beauty, intellect seeks truth, and the will seeks to give expression to goodness. The original mind pursues these values and finds great satisfaction in doing so. Generally speaking, we place spirit or ideas in Lee's Seung-sang or subject position, and his Hyung-sang or physical concerns come in second. Both are necessary, as we well know, but focused correctly in the right order, they become a very powerful creative source. Propositions like these are innate by nature, but there's work to be done, and sometimes it can become a bit of a battle against one's own self. So we read from Confucius of a return to the observance of the rites through overcoming the self. Jesus likewise talked of self-denial, set on the path to personal wholeness. In fact, all areas of life need to be reevaluated, but perhaps the term homo amans, a loving person, might best summarize this concern and the need for relational harmony. The Greeks, Confucius, Kant, and others all saw this as being grounded in the cultivation of character, in a search for excellence. We dream of such things, at least on a good day, and might remember to pursue the same virtues henceforth. Yang and Yin illustrate universal patterns. Paleopsychology traces these patterns to the earliest quantum realities, saying at the particulate level, even matter is orchestrated into social and familial-like constellations. Complexity, not surprisingly, rises from such early simplicities to the complex and conscious self, to family, and then to something more, the display of affection and empathies to heart. Here the richness of human concerns emerge from a universe defined by mental-like properties throughout. Simply, we're part of all this, but its most elegant expression, taking deep ecology one step beyond the work of Arne Naess. The union of a husband and wife displays a similar creative and relational pattern. So in masculine and feminine proposals, it's not difficult to see how a Yang-Yin model of creativity, a type of dual characteristic which informs systems, universes, and so on, also constellates in marriage and family. Husband and wife therefore represent the crown of the creative universe. We say here, one completes the other in such a couple. This union of a husband and wife is a sacred union, which in unification thought is moreover a Trinitarian proposal, where the couple also embrace all the transcendent virtues expressed from the beginning. In a sense, it's saying all three dwell together as one. This harmony of husband and wife leaves Seung-sang and Hyung-sang, as masculine and feminine, colored by heart, resemble the original image, that is to say, the Imago Dei. This takes a transcendent postulate, colored by warm intentions, down to earth in real time. Moreover, virtues are sustainable through this family and into the generations which follow. Systems theories, holarchies, sustainable autopoietic systems mimic the morphology of plants and at a more complex hierarchical level say much about our social and political systems. Humberto Maturana, Nicholas Luhmann, and others pick up on this salient point, extrapolating social organizations from nature, and examine how good communication is vital for any sustainable social construct as well. Without it, any system will wither and die. This family is a natural communicative hierarchical proposal, yet colored by love. It's about love and order, not the other way around. The lure of beauty persuades us. Imperatives tend to dissuade us. If any lineage is devoid of feeling and healthy communication, the child at some point will be damaged, or likely will rebel against this cold world. We tend to walk away from things which do not work. The family is constellated as a miniature solar system in terms of its order and organization. The infant's experience of love, empathy, and relationships, well communicated, create experiences of early forms, rhythms, colors, and basic social virtues established as a narrative in early life which comes up later as adults. In the arts, for example, the main categories of the beautiful and the sublime found in the Western canon are patterned after the qualities of the mother and the father. Confucius used this kind of thinking to support his system of filial piety, coextensive with the socio-politico order. Confucianism, as a system of holons and holarchies, unfortunately became a dry proposal under others and faded from the historical landscape. Love, order, and an advance into novelty depend on each other, and it's these systems dynamics, rich in effects, which tend to hold our attention. The Imago Dei is an archetypal pattern of a self and a process of individuation dedicated to this theme of resemblance and virtues. The Christ archetype as the self mirrors a transcendent counterpart, but also suggests the individual is vitally important and men and women hold to equal value. The self holds to a unique identity even at conception, a philosophy of seed. James Hillman, the psychologist, says the soul's code is written into the self from the outset, nothing less. The DNA signature, specific coding, also says the same. There's a common pattern or blueprint found in the psychoskeletal structure, and so on. Yet no two people are alike. Music often unfolds from a common mathematical structure, but artists interpret this differently in their unique way. If they didn't, the same old formulas would drive us mad. Character, therefore, the interior nature of the self, counts for everything in our world. Therefore, if we look for a rationale for the natural rights of a human being to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, it's written here in a simple aphorism, that all life is sacrosanct. In finding what the true self is and what an individual can succeed in, we're supplied with satisfaction and true joy. Therefore, Joseph Campbell, after studying mythic patterns all his life, suggested we would do well to follow our bliss, our unique internal compass, as a simple rule of thumb. These values and virtues of which we speak are absolute, unchanging, and very human too. The two characters on this slide are perhaps not entirely perfect, but they do reveal the signature of what a human being might potentially become. God's divine character includes omniscience, goodness, and so on. The characteristics of heart, logos, and creativity are important for resolving real problems. And it is here, in life, human potentials translate to our being and our behaviors. The core value of heart, or Shimjung, is defined as the emotional impulse to seek joy through love. Heart therefore expresses such qualities and holds to a deep sense of satisfaction when this principle of Shimjung becomes a substantial reality in one's life. Simply put, a life spent in loving, creating, and helping others has its own rewards. It's obviously not without challenges because Shimjung seeks outward manifestations. It's not self-centered. It's not enduring narcissisms. On top of taking care of the self, it's being profoundly aware of others. Virtues like these need practice, but in this way the values of beauty, truth, and goodness can transform a culture of narcissism into an oasis of dreams. If ethical norms percolate through all cultural activities by volition and by persistence, problems such as poverty, disease, and war can pragmatically be resolved by applying what is primarily a spiritual agenda to what might be manifested substantially on the ground. If absolute values, relatedness, and empathies come to color our world, this might see the economically privileged seeking to help those who are not, for example. A person developing any sense of emotional intelligence, heart, and conscience would feel stricken in the face of another's suffering. Society could therefore be transformed. To date, humankind has tried many different ways to actualize a true culture like this, but all attempts have been unsatisfactory. The Great Cultural Revolution in China is one example. The leaders of that revolution attempted to build a culture based on labor according with materialist dialectics, but their efforts resulted in the oppression of human rights and the delay of modernization and in the failure to control and eliminate corruption, all things they sought to improve. In fact, revolution usually introduces violence, building systems no better than the one it replaces. In this model, the revolution, however, starts within the self, seeking to establish a new perspective of character and personality, which can be trusted and respected. In this way, revolution is replaced by the search for personal authenticity. From the core of personal integrity, the self is first secured as an ethical reality. This is marked in yellow in the slide as the function of the mind. The principal building block of this future culture is therefore rooted in the efflorescence of the virtues of heart spreading throughout. The function of mind next moves to values, the section in green concerning emotion, intellect, will, and therefore to the virtues of beauty, truth, and goodness. The field of human endeavors, the blue section, becomes intimately involved with concern, consciousness, embedded profoundly into all culture. Therefore, fields of science, philosophy, ethics, arts, economics, and so forth are all defined in a similar way. It is a systemic proposition where one thing relates to another, as an ecology of mind might suggest. In a quest to understand such universal principles of creativity, East and West have both come up with many ideas, some enduring, some not. Plato, in the Timaeus, rejects the idea of dualism and offers us his trachoma. It is an early version of dual characteristics with an addition of a third force ascribed to the one, his notion of God and harmony. All other forms emerge from this function, so that his geometries and matter emerge from this method. Through Cratylus, Plato learned of Heraclitus, logos, and flux. So he is saying logos is the unchanging pattern, but in flux all complexities, including his geometries, emerge. Logos becomes his ideas, and later they become archetypes in the 20th century, which are essentially the same patterns and dynamics. Hegel posits a similar philosophy of thesis to antithesis, but later this philosophy splits into left and right-wing Hegelians. One version supports the Prussian state, and the other turns to violent revolution running through Feuerbach, Ruge, Bauer, Stirner, and so on, to Marx, where it drifts into unresolved revolutionary atheistic materialism. The philosophy of Hegel, particularly using the term antithesis, is unstable and sometimes contentious. In the Orient, however, yang and yin function in a harmonious creative synthesis. Night and day, masculine and feminine, subject and object, all support the way, enduring principles of nature viewed in flux. Yang and yin cooperate fully and support the ideas found in the Book of Changes. In the West, process theology agrees when it says processes presents an advance into novelty from one harmonious source. There are principles and there is flux. The form dynamics unification model on the right presents dynamic dual characteristics as the base creative postulate in unification thought. Such dynamics are picked up by philosophers such as John Berthrong in Boston, who draws in A.N. Whitehead and Chu Shi into debate, illustrating how cultures at both sides of the world seem to say much the same thing. These cosmological dynamics govern all from microcosmic to macrocosmic realities. The basic synthetic proposal defining general creativity is therefore a dual characteristics model which opens to phenomenology, a general creative principle rooted in the one, where this creative dynamic or first cause is always tied to harmony, purposiveness, and a concern for all. This is the basic dynamics of Logos, and we say the universe was crafted through Logos and performs its movement through this Logos. There is no antithesis as such unless generated by human pathologies. Logos creativity is an old idea, but here we take it to the quantum age and present a universal two-stage system of dynamics. It takes on a topological form in the diagram here, emergent from the one, and moves to forms, mass, and ultimately the world and self. Yet the two, idea and matter, are never separate. Structurally, the first stage, the inner base, consists of two quadruple bases. The first dynamic function gives rise to the second. In this inner base, content and structure emerge at a conceptual level. This is where the blueprints for creation are formed. These details are set in stone, unchanging functions and virtues, established as principles. In the second stage, Logos is created as a more practical and functional system of dynamics, holding to the same norms, yet all principles are now imbued by pre-energy, a dynamical function. Pre-energy as energy and information then translates to matter as Logos moves to the Big Bang. We can say, for example, the wave function and the particle offer such a model of all matter supported by mental-like properties in this way. Therefore, the wave supplies the information or consciousness, and the particle presents mass, but they are inseparable. This panpsychist proposal says mental-like properties are found throughout the universe, with concern consciousness emerging most fully at the highest level of complexity, you and I. Pre-Logos set between stage 1 and 2 is a reconsideration or re-evaluation of what has been wrought, and then when all things are considered and seen to be good, it's a go. The Big Bang, singularity to expansion, cooling to stars, stars to galaxies, then planets, and a move to the world and humankind. Structural events, skeletal systems, neurological networks, psyche, and character are all thought out, as is the environment suitable for such existence. We therefore function internally and externally, comfortably, in all dimensions of these existences, in time and space. At the levels of consciousness up the line, there is also free will. So we say, people are free, but optimally living in accordance with certain ethical norms, it is this which offers greatest satisfaction. Confucius said in the Analects, at 70, I followed my heart's desire without overstepping the line. At the age of 70, he was able to become a perfected being of Logos, in which free will, principles, and virtues were all upheld. He lived his ethical stance to life without any sense of being confined or restrained. The fields of existence emerging from the One likewise can be traced back to this point of non-dual harmony. There is a way up and a way down, so we are presented a ladder of ascent, a conflict resolution model, a relational model, and a model by which the functions of mind can rise to transcendence if one chooses. There is the way up. I and Thou by Martin Buber is written up as a dialogical potential for such true experiences of communion with a higher power, an experience that moves to tangible and wholly desirable results. He was impressed with the fact that the essence of the individual lay in the embrace of this relationship, and then, through participation in the community, all mundane acts became sacred. Logos, this interconnected type of deep ecology, offers the same unchanging virtues, sociability, and personal creativity. Paul Tillich thought the essence of perfection within the Godhead remains in a state of dreaming innocence. The imaginal and archetypal world was like this, and therefore Tillich was somewhat of a Jungian and an idealist who offered a clear primeval ground as a source of archetypal patterns and their multiple expressions. But rather than leave this like an idea hovering a sky allure, as Plato's critics said of him, let's put this more firmly on the ground as virtues and as processes within the arts. Here is Isamu Noguchi. If you don't like the Taurus-like sculpture at the top, I understand, but others, like Vermeer, Chilhuli, Leonardo, Rothko, and so on, would do just as well. Psychological models of creativity say this, as presented by Gilbert Rose, Anton Ehrenzweig, or George Hagman, and they also support this idea of a deep and patterned ground for creativity, much of which is intuited by the artist before being taken to functional realities. These positive psychological models are well suited to an explanation of Logos creativity. Look at the idea taking shape here. It's first the idea, then the blueprint, including concerns, hopefully of the heart, but in the first stage much is thought out internally and externally as the form the work will take. At the second stage, detailing, materials, the build, and so on, becomes more realistic just prior to the construction or creation. Momentarily, there's a pre-logos function, where a final reconsideration of the work takes place. This honing of ideas reveals the same dynamics as our hypothetical logos and places it in the mind of an artist just before the work emerges. The ultimate concern, Shimjung asks, to what ends does a creative person work? Is it to satisfy the self? Is it a type of fragmentation and Freudian pathological expression? Or does it lure us by beauty to transcendent euphoria, to gestalt experiences, to transcendent virtues, as a good concert or painting might, or serve us in other ways by leading us into novelty where new ideas alone might dazzle? Being left breathless at the end of a multimedia performance or standing in awe before a new canvas is, after all, not such a bad thing. In the end, art is completed in our cultural world and might serve us well in upliftment and celebration. Logos creativity is profoundly concerned with such idealistic affirmations, and it's doable. This is a methodology of true creativity, tried to our possessive cosmos and to the concept of original nature. In the second part, soon to be posted, we look at all of this and how it impacts ecology, culture, and politics. In the meantime, thanks for your time. It's much appreciated, and see you soon.